So in this lecture, we're continuing on with values, value assumptions, and we're going to be adding in value conflicts and ethics as well. So the first thing I want to start this lecture with is a question of why are we learning this skill? Why are we adding values and value assumptions into arguments? How does that help us as critical thinkers? Well, the main reason is it allows us to be less ego-centered and more open-minded. These are two very important skills to have as a critical thinker. You want to have the ability to focus on perspectives other than your own. It allows you to be more understanding of those who do not hold the same views. It also allows us to have a little more empathy and again more understanding. Our thinking is softened when we understand their perspective and understand it's part of their value system. It keeps us out of brainstem, especially when we begin discussing really touchy topics. There are topics that will trigger people, and they have a very hard time understanding the other side. They instantly will feel a little bit brainstem, even discussing the particular issue. But as critical thinkers, it's important to try and soften ourselves a bit with that. I found this fantastic quote, and it ties in perfectly to keeping yourself out of brainstem. Because when someone tries to trigger you by insulting you, or doing or saying something that irritates you, or even if we discuss an issue that is very, very problematic for you, take a deep breath, switch off your ego, and remember, if you are easily offended, you are easily manipulated. And that's the goal, is to not be manipulated by others. That if you stay out of brainstem, listen to their side, then you're going to be able to argue your point in a much more calm and logical manner. Because I'm not saying that you're going to change your viewpoint. It's important, as I said before, to know who you are and what you believe. But it allows you to soften yourself and hear their side. Even though you're sticking to your side, you can still listen to theirs and have an understanding of where they're coming from. It definitely improves your critical thinking and critical reading. Now, adding to that are value conflicts, and this is also important for critical thinkers and critical readers to understand that most of the strongest arguments that we have in society are based on values, based on very strongly held values, and they do need to be respected. For example, issues that continue to be unresolved involve very cherished values on both sides. So, for example, if we begin discussing abortion, people have very, very strong feelings about this. Both sides do. So value conflicts can occur between groups, they can occur with an individual. One thing to remember with a value conflict, though, is we all value order and justice. I don't think we're going to argue about that. We don't argue about the virtues of mass murder, rape, burglary, or child abuse. I think we can all agree that those are definitely not positive things. But we will argue very violently about how justice is administered. Many of us feel very differently on how you punish these types of crimes. So when we're looking again at value issues, think about your conclusion to these. Should we lower the drinking age to 18? Should rapists receive the same penalties as murderers? Should we automatically give any convicted child molester the death penalty? Should we ban the sale of assault rifles? Your value system is giving you your conclusion. Well, the value system of others is giving them their conclusion as well. And so your values are conflicting with the person who's on the other side's values. And so in value conflicts, basically we are looking at an issue, and I'm going to do a demonstration of how to do this in a video in the next section. So there will be a lot more about value conflicts. But basically what you're doing is thinking about the values on each side of the issue. So should teenagers be required to obtain the approval of parents before receiving birth control pills or other forms of contraception? You would look at the side of teenagers who might say, yes, we should have this type of freedom. And that's what they're valuing. They're valuing the freedom of it. But on the other side would probably be their parents. And their parents are probably valuing, the safety of their children and want to make sure that they are obtaining contraception safely. And so you have freedom versus safety conflicting with one another. And that's what the value conflict is. And value prioritization is whenever we create policies for difficult or controversial problems, we're actually giving one value a higher priority than another. So back to this issue here, if we have teens' freedoms versus parents' feelings of safety, because we do have Planned Parenthood that allows teenagers to receive birth control without parent permission, that means our society has given the value priority to freedom for the teenagers. Now we also have what are called ideal values and real values. Ideal values are values you believe to be good and right and values you hold. But real values are the values you believe to be good and consistently act upon in your life. Those are what your real values are. I like to use cheating in school as an example for this one. Whenever I ask students, do you think that cheating in school is a good idea? 90% of them will say, no, no, it's not right, it's not good. But then I'll ask, have any of you ever cheated? And the ones that do have to admit it and say, I guess it's not a real value because I'm not consistently acting upon it, not, doing it 95 to 100% of the time. So for me, that might just be an ideal value. And so it's important to kind of know the difference. What are your ideal values, things that you do believe, but what are the real values, things that you act upon? Because again, no judgments, but as critical thinkers, we have to understand and be honest about our own behaviors. And we need to be able to distinguish our words from our actions. Now, ethics is a dimension of values. Ethics can also be used with the term morals. Ethics are your standard of conduct. It's your behavior, which is different from values. Values are what you hold important. Ethics is how you behave in our society. I like to think of ethics as the right or wrong, the good or bad dimension. So the way you behave in society. So for example, if you find the cashier has given you too much change, do you return the money? Your answer to that is a reflection of your ethics. It's your behaviors. And so then with that, you think, are there situations in which something is legal but not ethical? And are there situations in which something is ethical but not legal? And a good example is the article that we read at the beginning of the module called You Make the Call. It was legal for the coaches to use their particular baseball strategy, but was it ethical? And then, are there situations in which something is ethical but not legal? I remember this one with kind of the Robin Hood strategy. So, for example, if you're stealing food to give to a starving person, it might be considered ethical, but it's still definitely not legal. And within ethics, we have 5 common schools of thought. And this is also very important for you to have an understanding of where a person is coming from. You look at their values, and then you also think about maybe the school of thought that guides the person. We have libertarianism, utilitarianism, egalitarianism, religious values, and prima facie values. And I have to say that I'm sorry about that, that these are perfectly explained on page 17 in the textbook. In fact, the textbook does a very good job of providing a lot of examples to help you understand the differences. And then you can also think about what you are. Oftentimes, we're a combination of a few, and it's important to know what that combination is. And so you're going to do a little activity that includes these 5 schools of thought. So make sure you read that section in the textbook, or at least put a post-it on it, because you'll be asked these over and over. Okay, so now just to finish up real quickly here, as far as ethics in argumentation goes, when you are making an argument, you need to be honest. Okay, do not distort the information. Make sure you're researching your claims, especially if you're having a very serious and formal argument. Listen with respect to opposing views. You would think that's obvious, but it's actually very hard to listen. Oftentimes, we think about what we're going to say next instead of really listening to what the other person is saying. Be willing to revise your position if you have newer, better information presented to you. Don't be stubborn with that. Sometimes we do have to revise our positions. And of course, always giving credit to other sources of information, very important in college especially. And as you're reading arguments, you need to know that the authors, again, really should be honest if they're writing this, especially if they're publishing it. They shouldn't distort information. Authors should research their claims, listen to respect, be willing to revise position, and give credit to other sources. This is something that journalists are expected to do. And I know in our society right now, we have the term fake news, and it is something that we're going to explore a little bit as critical thinkers, because it's very important to know what is true and what is not true in our society. And sometimes we do have to dig to find the truth. And in your textbook, there is a whole section on ethical decision making. The textbook does a great job of describing these. So I recommend making sure that you put a post-it in this section as well. And we'll do a few activities with it. But basically, ethical decision making is using little tests to help you make the best and the most ethical decisions. It gives you a chance to look at others' perspectives. And so this is another portion that we will hit upon as well. And that pretty much concludes the 3/4 of Chapter 2. And so the rest of the activities within this module are just going to be practice for you to continue to use values and value assumptions and ethics as you're reading and making arguments.